this transition in terms of who's on your mental board of directors and what thought patterns you habitually fall into, it isn't overnight work. This isn't something that is now going to change for you right this minute because you have listened to this podcast episode. But it is something that with focus, with support, with intention, these are changes that you can make. And these are changes that are going to support you in feeling more confident, feeling more whole internally, and achieving incredible accomplishments in your career.
Welcome to The Art of Speaking Up, a podcast that helps professional women access the limitless potential that lies within them. I'm your host, Jessica Guzik, and my mission is to help you find that spark inside you that has the power to transform your career in ways you may not have thought possible. I'm so excited that you're here. And now, on to the show.
Welcome to part 3 on my episode series on self-confidence and mindset. I am assuming that by this point, you've listened to parts 1 and 2. If you haven't, this part is not going to make sense. So definitely go back and get caught up and then come back to part 3. In this part, I am talking about the intentional curation of who I want to sit on my board of directors that exists within my mind. So a quick recap, just to remind you of what we talked about in parts 1 and 2. I like to think of all of the thoughts that we experience within our mind as not necessarily belonging to us and being our own thoughts, but I like to think about it as there's an imaginary board of directors that lives in our mind and is offering us thoughts all day long. And the idea behind this episode series is that we want to make sure that the perspectives and voices of the people who are on our mental board of directors are encouraging and uplifting and help us show up big and take up space in the world so that we can achieve the goals that matter most to us. And in part 3, we're continuing the audit, where I am helping you audit who is on your psychological board of directors. Do you have any negative Nellies on there who need to be fired? That's what we talked about in part 2. And in this part 3, we're going to talk about who we want to be appearing and sitting on that board of directors. Because as I mentioned at the close of part 2, when we have lots of negative thoughts and negative voices on our internal psychological board of directors, we can try to fire them and just get rid of those negative thoughts. But sometimes they can be stubborn and those negative thoughts can stick around and our negative board members refuse to leave the boardroom. And so if that's the case, what we want to do is we want to drown out those negative voices with new voices, new perspectives, new board members who are encouraging and who really help us see and believe in our true potential. And that's what we are talking about in part 3. I'm going to be walking you through the board members that I intentionally curate on my own psychological board of directors. And really, they're just symbols for the perspectives and thoughts that I try to adopt as I am moving through the world so that I can feel powerful and take up space. Now, as a reminder, if you want to do this audit with me and follow along with me and do your own version of this exercise, I have a worksheet where I guide you through the exact steps that I am walking through in this episode series so that you can do this exercise for yourself. It guides you through all of the steps, and it also shows you the list of the members of my board of directors, both good and bad. If you want to do the audit, click the link in the show notes or go to jessguzikcoaching.com/audit to access that worksheet. And now let's get into the curation of the positive, uplifting, encouraging voices on my board of directors. And one thing that I will say before I get into the list is that as we are learning to disconnect from our negative thoughts and the pessimistic perspectives that our mind often generates, particularly when we're trying to take up space in the world and reach for more, I really like to think about it as practice. I am practicing having these more encouraging, supportive, inspirational, motivational, affirming thoughts. So with that in mind, I'm going to walk you through some of the positive board members who I practice inviting into my mental board of directors to help me feel strong and confident. So this is going to be uplifting, and now we get to look at the good stuff. So the first member that I like to curate on my psychological board of directors, she's just one of my favorites. I'm obsessed with her. I could talk about her all day long. I named her Visionary Vivian. Visionary Vivian is the board member that encouraged me and fought for me to start this podcast and to believe that I had a real message to share and that my voice was worth putting out in the world. So Visionary Vivian is a board member, aka a part of me and a part of my psyche, who believes that anything is possible. She's willing to imagine what could be and what I could create and the success that I could achieve, even when it doesn't exist yet. In some ways, she's the opposite of Doomsday Deborah, who I talked about in part 2. Doomsday Deborah is always imagining the worst case scenario, what could go wrong, how I might fail. Visionary Vivian is the opposite. She's always thinking about the best case scenario. She's willing to believe in an incredible outcome, even if it hasn't come to fruition yet. And in fact, she loves doing that. It energizes her to think about what could be created, what could be possible. Visionary Vivian has played a massive role in my life, in my career, in my success. I mentioned that she's probably the board member who really fought for me to launch this podcast way back when, several years ago, when I was really doubting myself and feeling terrified. She's also the coach voice within me. When I am coaching my clients, I am leaning heavily on the voice and perspective of Visionary Vivian because she's able to hold these optimistic visions, not just for what I can achieve and accomplish, but also for what other people can achieve and accomplish. Her visionary quality really easily extends outwards to other people. And so she's very loud in my mind when I am guiding and coaching my clients into their fullest self-expression and their fullest potential as well. So that's Visionary Vivian. She's the first one. The second person who I intentionally curate on my board of directors, she is just awesome. Could also talk about her all day long. I have named her Strategic Sally. Strategic Sally is super focused on getting it done and making it happen. She understands that sometimes bad things happen and sometimes you fail and sometimes things get really difficult, but she has so much belief in her ability to problem solve her way out of it. And as soon as there's an obstacle or a failure or something difficult, instead of her feeling discouraged, she feels motivated and she feels empowered to find a solution. And she loves the process of challenging herself to find new solutions. Strategic Sally has been enormously useful to me throughout my life, but she was especially useful to me as I launched my coaching business. And I had to start it completely from scratch. And it was very, very difficult. And I really needed to lean on Strategic Sally to help me learn all of these new skills and solve all of these new challenges that I had never faced before. The next person that I like to curate on my mental board of directors is Motivated Merlinda. Motivated Merlinda likes to prove to herself that she is going to find a way. And Motivated Merlinda's energy isn't like an unhealthy trying to prove it to herself. It's more of like a determined trying to prove it to herself. She likes to see herself as being in competition with herself, and she likes to push herself to rise to the occasion and exceed her own expectations for what she believes is possible because she finds that really fun and rewarding. It feels like an exciting accomplishment to her, almost like a game of like, let me see how much I am capable of doing. The next person that I like to curate on my imaginary board of directors is Encouraging Edie. Encouraging Edie has been a very, very challenging board member for me to invite in. So I will say, in terms of like Visionary Vivian, Strategic Sally, Motivated Merlinda, those board members are easy for me to bring in. Those energies and thoughts are natural for me. Like those are the easier ones. Encouraging Edie has been more challenging for me and has required more work, but has also been incredibly rewarding. So encouraging Edie cheers me on no matter what. Like, no matter how well I performed or what the outcome is, her only job is to encourage me. So if I did something incredible, encouraging Edie will get so excited that I accomplished something so incredible. But even if I do something like somewhat exciting, but that's not a big deal, encouraging Edie will find something to get excited about and celebrate. And even if I mess something up or do something wrong, encouraging Edie will identify some action that I took in that process that is worthy of celebration. And not only does she celebrate after the fact, but she's very present through the process of whatever it is I'm doing, showing up, reminding me that I'm doing a great job. Like I mentioned, she was a lot harder for me to cultivate. So for me, being determined and having a vision has been much easier than learning to be encouraging towards myself. But what I have found, and this comes up a lot in my work with clients, is that if we're highly motivated and we're kind of good at like revving ourselves up and feeling super determined, but we don't balance that out with like a softer sense of encouragement, and we don't have someone like encouraging Edie on the board of directors, what can happen is we can really burn ourselves out and we might lack balance in the motivation that we are leaning on and demonstrating. And so encouraging Edie plays a really important role in ensuring that my intense drive and my intense visionary qualities are balanced out by like a softness and a kindness. And so many of my clients, when this comes up in my work with them, whether it comes up in my one-on-one work, it comes up a lot in my group program, the Art of Speaking Up Academy. A lot of my clients think like that if they cultivate a softness within them and like a kindness within them, that it's going to take away their motivation, that their motivation is just going to shrink and they're just going to like lie around and sip margaritas all day long. And I just have not found that to be true at all. And I've had encouraging Edie on my board of directors for a while now. And what I've actually noticed is that the motivation that I have feels healthier, more authentic, more grounded, more sustainable. And if anything, I'm able to accomplish bigger things than before because the emotional safety that I feel in the support and encouragement that she offers makes me feel brave enough to take certain risks that maybe I was too afraid to take before I had someone like encouraging Edie on my board of directors. Because if you think about like the board of directors and risk taking, if you take a risk and you fail and you have like lots of mean, negative people on your mental board of directors, they're going to come at you like vultures and just come after you and attack you and tell you how horrible you are. But when you have a voice or perspective like encouraging Edie on your mental board of directors and you take a risk and you fail, it's like you have a soft landing place. Like you have a soft place to fall back. And that makes you feel so much safer, so much more ready to put yourself out there and take risks. So not only does being kind and soft and encouraging towards yourself help you sustain that fire and that motivation, but I think it also enables you to take risks that feel way too scary to take in the absence of a supportive member of your mental board of directors. So that is encouraging Edie, and I am so thankful for her. And every day I have to remind myself to invite her into my mental board of directors. And when I do, things are so much more smooth and enjoyable and successful. So that's encouraging Edie. Now, next to encouraging Edie is compassionate Connie, who is very similar, but slightly different. So encouraging Edie is there to remind me that I can do it, and she's there to celebrate my accomplishments. Compassionate Connie is just purely there to dispense care and to give me a sense of being taken care of, being loved, feeling safe. So she's not necessarily always like encouraging me. She's always just there to offer me a hug and a warm cup of tea and to remind me that no matter what happens, I am a worthy human and that she will always be there to support me. This is one of the really big internal capacities that I am working with my clients to cultivate. And I will say now, having worked with well over 100 women, most of the women that are attracted to my work really struggle being compassionate with themselves. And they do not have anyone resembling compassionate Connie on their mental board of directors. And I think this makes a lot of sense because this is also an area that I have really struggled with. And I've had to put so much effort to invite her into my board of directors and to learn to be kind and loving towards myself. And so it makes a lot of sense then that my work will tend to attract someone with a similar psychological disposition. And so a lot of the work that I'm doing with my clients is really to help them invite in this more compassionate, generous presence within themselves. I really, really lacked this. And in place of compassionate Connie, I had very, cruel thoughts towards myself, right? And I had those really mean members of my board of directors, like bitchy Barbara and judgy Judy. And so it's taken me work and effort to invite in compassionate Connie. And I will say, like, a lot of people can be skeptical of the value of learning to treat ourselves with compassion and learning to cultivate a loving, compassionate presence within ourselves, within our own psyche. A lot of people feel like, well, like, what's the point of that? That's not productive. Like, that's not going to help me achieve my goals. And that's a really common thing that comes up. It may or may not come up for you. But what I would want to offer, if that's coming up, is just that typically, if you haven't achieved what you want, like if you haven't created what you want in your life and your career, it's typically not because you're like missing some skill or there's like some practical thing you need. Like it's typically at its core an emotional challenge. Like there's some emotional component that feels really, really difficult that is preventing you from taking that step forward, whatever that step might be, whether it's taking up more space at work, using your voice, going for a promotion, being more proactive, how you lead your team. Like whatever it is, there's an emotional barrier. And in order to overcome these emotional barriers that we face, we have to be able to support ourselves, to help ourselves feel safe, to help ourselves feel like it's going to be okay when we face the scary thing. And without an internal sense of compassion, it becomes really hard for us to work through those challenging emotional experiences. So even if you're a pragmatist and you're someone who's like, I just like want to get things done, compassion is an important ingredient in helping us have the inner psychological resources that we need to pursue our goals and show up really big in the world. So it's not just a feel-good exercise, although it does feel good to love yourself. It does feel good to be able to offer yourself a sense of peace and love and safety just internally within yourself. It does feel good, and there is a utility to it. It has a really practical, positive benefit in your life. This is why I love coaching so much. Like, this is why I love the work that I do so much, because it's not just about the result that I get to help my clients accomplish, whether it's a promotion or finding their voice in a really scary room filled with leaders and executives. But it's also that through that process, they are learning to treat themselves in a far more supportive way. And what a beautiful gift we have in the universe that the path to our goals involves us learning to treat ourselves amazingly. How cool is it that there isn't a trade-off there where it's like I can either have the success that I want or I can treat myself well, but I can't have both? How incredible is it that treating ourselves well is what helps us get the success that we want? And I think there's nothing that I feel stronger or more passionate about, because I think as women, we are overdue to experience success and we are overdue to treat ourselves well. We all deserve more of those things. I feel like for so many of us, we haven't gotten to experience as much of those things as we deserve. And so I really view my work in the world as helping women have more of both of these really important things that they are entitled to, which is the success that they want and also the beautiful, empowered, healthy, loving relationships with themselves that they want. Okay, so that's compassionate Connie. Now, there's a few more people that I curate for my imaginary board of directors. So the next one is Brenda the bouncer. So Brenda the bouncer, I just imagine her as this really strong, muscular bouncer who's not going to let anyone shifty into the club or AKA into the boardroom. And her job is to make sure that some of the negative people that I don't want on my mental board of directors aren't sneaking into the boardroom. Because remember, in part 2, I talked about how they're pretty stubborn and you kick them out and they come back in and they don't necessarily listen to you. And so I need someone on my board of directors who's keeping an eye out for that and who's noticing like, oh, the reason you're feeling so bad today is because perfectionist Pam has entered the room and is being super loud. And so Brenda the bouncer acts as a filter or a layer of awareness to notice if there's any negative, loud voices coming into the boardroom. And what that means for me at a mindset level is just noticing if I'm falling into any old thought patterns, negative thought patterns, judging myself, blaming myself, being mean to myself, because those things will inevitably pop up. But often just the awareness that they've come back into the picture is enough to remind me of how I want to show up and what decisions I want to make. So Brenda the bouncer is making sure that things don't get too funky in the boardroom. Okay, after Brenda the bouncer, next to her is someone who plays a very similar but complementary role. And this person is Objective Olivia. So Objective Olivia is like the opposite of my negative board member, Contortionist Katrina. So you'll recall from part 2 that Contortionist Katrina contorts facts and contorts reality to fit in with a negative interpretation of the world. So Objective Olivia is the antidote to Contortionist Katrina. And Objective Olivia's only job is to remind me to look at the objective facts. So she's not like encouraging Edie, where she's always looking for the good and always celebrating what's exciting. Objective Olivia is literally like, wait, but what actually happened today? So for example, let's say I'm feeling bad and I realize I'm feeling bad because judgmental Judy is like, you're such a horrible person, Jess. Like you said you were going to get all this stuff done today and you totally didn't. Objective Olivia will just say, hold on, Jess, let's make a list of what you got done today. What did you get done today? And so often, just literally by looking at the facts, literally by looking at the data, I'm like, oh, I got a lot done today. This is just judgmental Judy running her mouth, but it's not based on reality. And so Objective Olivia is there to bring me back to reality. And it's so funny, right? Because like as humans, we think that we are taking in reality objectively. From a psychological point of view, that's just not how our minds work. We tend to exclude information. We tend to distort information. It's just how the human mind works. It's kind of a bug of how our psyche operates. And if we don't realize that this is happening, we could get stuck in a really negative headspace. We could really get in our own way, not because of actual facts, but because of what we're imagining the facts to be or the way that we are contorting the facts. This is an interesting role that I often play with my clients. When a client is coming to me and I'm supporting them with something, again, whether it's one-on-one, whether it's in my group program, the Art of Speaking Up Academy, sometimes I'm helping them reframe their thinking. But a lot of times, one of the first things I'm doing is just gathering the facts and just finding out what actually happened. Because very often our emotional experience and our interpretation of what happened isn't a match for the facts. And it can be so empowering to just sort of take back control of your perception of reality and be like, no, like these are the facts. And as you catch yourself distorting facts and you get better at having a board member like Objective Olivia who can remind you of the actual facts, your confidence tends to grow over time, because a huge reason that people's confidence doesn't grow is that their mind is constantly distorting things to the point where they can't even see or take in their own success. I did an entire episode on this, which I will link in the show notes. But if you can't see your success accurately, if you're constantly contorting your accomplishments to seem smaller and less significant than they are, then you're never going to feel confident because it's as if you haven't done anything. It's as if you're not capable, even though the evidence clearly states that you are. So that is Objective Olivia. And I have one last person who I curate on my mental board of directors, and that is Forgiving Fiona. Forgiving Fiona is really good at exercising the mental muscle of forgiveness. Her only job is to offer me forgiveness when I feel like I have made a mistake. And this one has also been one that's been really challenging for me because, like I mentioned, I'm someone who will tend to struggle more with the self-compassion piece, being kind to myself, being encouraging. And that also includes forgiveness. So some of my negative board members, when I make a mistake, those negative board members want to attack me and tell me how horrible I am. And Forgiveness Fiona is a voice who can counteract that and who can say, it's okay. I forgive you for doing that. Now, one thing that comes up quite a lot in my client work is the difference between blaming ourselves for a mistake versus learning from a mistake. So when I say forgive myself for a mistake, that doesn't mean I'm not going to learn from the mistake and try to improve. Maybe I made a mistake that harmed me and my own goals. Maybe I made a mistake that hurt someone else. So forgiving myself doesn't mean I'm not going to look at what happened and understand how I can learn and evolve from that. What it means is that I'm not going to be beating myself up and telling myself what a vile, horrible person I am as I go through that process. And I think a lot of us associate learning from the mistake as coming from or emerging from self-punishment. So I think we have this idea that I must punish myself in order to learn from this. And if I forgive myself, am I saying that it's just okay for me to show up in ways that I don't want to and do things that are counter to my goals and just do whatever I feel like? And it's no. That assumption is based on thinking that we can only learn through punishment. And actually, punishment is one of the most ineffective ways to learn. So maybe it's something that appeared in our life in the past where we were modeled that we are punished in order to learn. And we internalize that as adults now. And that's kind of how we're operating. But in reality, we can learn and be kind to ourselves simultaneously. And what I have found is actually when we forgive ourselves, the learning and the evolution tends to stick and integrate more easily. So we think if I don't punish myself, I'm not going to learn from this. It's usually the opposite. When we punish ourselves, we really struggle to learn from it because our critical thinking faculties are shutting down. And that self-punishing is so emotionally intense. We're not open to learning. We're not open to taking in a lesson. We're just stuck in a really painful, negative headspace, and we're not really integrating the learning. And so this is a really important one that can be very difficult, but is worth cultivating, especially if you want to pursue higher levels of leadership. This is something that I'm talking about so often with so many of my clients. But as you take on more leadership roles, bigger roles, bigger scope, the stakes in some ways get higher. And when the stakes get higher, you want to make sure that those higher stakes don't debilitate you. And if you're not good at forgiving yourself, then every time you make a mistake, because of those higher stakes, it's going to feel unbearable. It's going to feel so difficult. It is the forgiveness muscle that helps you hold and navigate the pressure of higher stakes. Because if something doesn't go perfectly, you are going to be able to support yourself through that experience and learn from that experience. Because the truth is, even the most confident, talented, perfect, amazing leader in the world is going to make mistakes. It's inherent in the job. When you're being asked to do something bigger and more complex, mistakes become a part of the process. And it's not about who can do it perfectly. It's about who has the fortitude and the courage to actually be willing to do it messy enough to get it done. It's not like the leaders who are in big positions got there and are succeeding because they're so perfect. They're succeeding because they can tolerate being messy, because they are okay to make mistakes and spend a little bit of time in the mess. And I know this can be really challenging if you're someone who likes to get it right and you have a perfectionist Pam on your board of directors and you're a bit type A like I am. I totally get it. And forgiveness is such a powerful way to help you learn to feel safe being messier. So those are the perspectives and quote unquote people that I invite into my mental board of directors. And I can tell you that the intentional work of inviting those perspectives in has literally changed my life. It's not just changed my career, it's changed me as a person. I'm a different person because of this work. And this transition in terms of who's on your mental board of directors and what thought patterns you habitually fall into, it isn't overnight work. This isn't something that is now going to change for you right this minute because you have listened to this podcast episode. But it is something that with focus, with support, with intention, these are changes that you can make. And these are changes that are going to support you in feeling more confident, feeling more whole internally, and achieving incredible accomplishments in your career. This is at the essence of the work that I'm doing with my clients. I am helping them think differently and have a new and different internal psychological experience that supports them in feeling strong inside and that supports them in taking up space and having a powerful, assertive voice in the room. If this is work that you are ready to dive into more deeply, if you are ready to become a strong, powerful voice in the room, not just because you know all the surface level skills, but because you've done the deeper work to strengthen your mindset and your confidence, I would love to help you do that. And that is exactly what I do with my clients in my group program, the Art of Speaking Up Academy. I'm going to be opening enrollment for a future cohort beginning at the end of September. And I strongly recommend that you add yourself to the waitlist so that you don't miss out on the enrollment period. You can find the waitlist by going into the show notes or by heading over to jessguzikcoaching.com/academy. And before I sign off, one last reminder, if you want the free audit worksheet that goes with this episode series, I'm also going to link that in the show notes. So check out the show notes for all of the next steps. Thank you for coming on this journey with me. This series was so much fun to record. And if it touched you or moved you in some way, please send me a note. I will also put my email in the show notes. All the stuff in the show notes, you will find it there. Have an amazing day, and I'll catch you in the next episode. Bye.